Ranjani Srinivasan, a student at Columbia University, the alma mater of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, among others, has had to leave the United States because her student visa was revoked by the State Department, and subsequently the university withdrew her enrollment. She was a PhD student in urban planning. Her crime was that she participated in a protest against the Israeli genocide in Gaza. Now, United States has been known for its anti-war protests from the time of the Vietnam to war against Iraq. I have been personally witness to protests in 91 when the senior George Bush was preparing to attack or had already attacked Iraq, and there were campus protests. I was on the UC Berkeley campus, but there were nationwide protests against the US attack on Iraq. United States was lying that Iraq had nuclear weapons. The UN agency, International Atomic Energy Authority, had verified that there were no nuclear weapons. In spite of that, the United States attacked Iraq. There was a lot of hue and cry and the protests all over the United States, and that has been the general freedom of speech status in United States, where the citizens have been allowed to protest against what they perceive as wrong decisions of the government. This time, however, since the attack of Hamas on Israel on 7th of October 2023, even though, like in the past, there were protests all over the United States, but at some places there was police crackdown. For example, in New York and some other campuses, and there were a few exceptions. The chancellor at UC Berkeley took a position in favor of the Palestinians and for the human rights of the people who were getting killed by the Israeli attacks, and everybody saw how the United States brazenly supported Israel by giving it money, arms, and even security personnel. So what has happened is very disturbing, because it is the end of a culture of human rights in United States, where at least within human rights, I'm not talking of what the United States does outside in the third world countries. I'm talking about how very high standards of human rights have been maintained inside the United States, and how the freedom of speech has been respected. Now, this comes as part of the First Amendment to the US Constitution. The First Amendment to the US Constitution, among other things, says that the citizens have a freedom to speak without any government interference. They have freedom to petition, freedom to assembly and other things, but most importantly, they have freedom of speech. And if students consider that the attack by Israel, supported by United States on Gaza, is unjust, then they are protected by the Constitution of the United States to say what they believe in. Of course, there were counter protests by the Jewish students, and they were also allowed, and they have every right to protest as the pro-Palestinian students. But unfortunately, this has never happened in the past in the United States, like what has happened in the Columbia University recently, that a Palestinian student, Mahmoud Khalil, has been detained and Ranjani Srinivasan's visa has been revoked. Now this girl has to clarify that she was not part of the protest, she was just walking through the crowd and the police arrested her. There were 2 charges leveled against her, that she was blocking the traffic and she was not dispersing upon police orders. Both charges have been dismissed by the court, and I think she should not waver from her stand. If she has participated in the protests in favor of the Palestinians against the Israeli genocide, she had to flee to Canada. But we hope that the visa which has been revoked will be reinstated, her student status will be reinstated at Columbia, and she will be able to pursue her PhD. Because if you don't allow this kind of freedom on student campuses, then what is the meaning of education? If there is an atmosphere of fear on campuses and students are not allowed to speak freely, you can't have open discussions in classes, then what is the entire objective of education? I mean, are we just going to produce students who will suit the market and the government and will just become a cog in the wheel? There is a famous speech by the student leader Mario Savio in the 1960s free speech movement at Berkeley, where he exactly says this, that if university becomes corporations, if their managers, if the vice chancellors or chancellors become managers and students become products, then what is the whole objective of education? So we condemn what the United States has done, and we stand for the right of Ranjani Srinivasan and hundreds and thousands of students all over the university campuses in the United States and the citizens of United States for their freedom of speech. And we think that what the government is saying is contradictory in a sense, because they are saying that Ranjani Srinivasan is a sympathizer of terrorists. They still believe that Hamas is a terrorist organization. In 2006, Hamas won an election and came to power in the whole of Palestine. It was not allowed to rule West Bank. It was only limited to Hamas, but it runs an elected government in Hamas till date. How can you call an elected organization a terrorist organization? And it is the same United States which has negotiated in Egypt along with the Egyptian authorities and the Qatar authorities a deal with the Hamas, as part of which a number of hostages, total 141, of which 114 are Jews, they have been released after a peace deal has been arrived at between United States, Egypt, Qatar on one hand and Hamas on the other. So does the United States mean to say that it can negotiate with the terrorist organization and arrive at a peace deal, but continue to consider it a terrorist organization? Does the United States not remember that it has handed over the power of Afghanistan on a silver platter to Taliban, which is still considered a terrorist organization by many countries. India doesn't have a full diplomatic relation with the present government of Taliban in Afghanistan. It is now only considering to have a diplomatic relationship. So, when it suits the interest of United States, then they can hand over the power of Afghanistan to Taliban, knowing very well that the rights of women will be crushed under the Talibani, religious conservative government. And when it suits United States, because it has to protect Israel, it can enter into a peace deal with Hamas. And mind you, Hamas has not been defeated in the war. If you look at the peace deal, against 141 hostages released by Hamas, almost 2,000 prisoners have been released by Israel from their jails. So, more than 10 times, about 15 times, prisoners have been released by Israel, had to be released by Israel if Israel wanted its hostages to be freed. They have agreed to have the Palestinians move into North Gaza, which was gotten vacated by Israel during the war. They have agreed to have the Israeli forces withdraw from the areas where they have gone into. They have agreed that all the humanitarian aid which was stopped by Israel will start flowing back into Gaza. And most importantly, they have agreed to the reconstruction of Gaza. Now tell me, are all these conditions being agreed with an organization which runs an elected government in Hamas, or is a terrorist organization? If it is a terrorist organization, then why is the United States dealing with a terrorist organization? And if it is not a terrorist organization, then United States has no right to call Ranjani Srinivasan a terrorist sympathizer. She is standing for the rights of the common Palestinians who have suffered miserably. They have had to go without shelter, food, electricity, water. And it is amazing how in these difficult conditions they have fought the much stronger Israeli forces, backed by the United States and European governments, and has still survived after this period of about a year and a half, and have gotten all their demands met by the powerful forces of the world. So we support the people of Palestine. Socialist Party India stands with the right of the Palestinians in Gaza and West Bank and at other places in refugee camps, and stands for the right of Ranjani Srinivasan and every student with Mahmood Khalil and every student in United States who thinks that Israel has committed genocide and must be prevented from further killing Palestinians and must be forced to agree to all terms which have been agreed upon in the peace deal. Thank you.